This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, fall outlook turns bleaker for small businesses. What does a technology investment do for a business? Data management presents an opportunity, and it's more than just security. A tech mistake in data management exposes Afghan risk. How is the IT provider market viewing its future? And a scary new ransomware tactic, insiders. Hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into this week's stories. HashiCorp's first State of Cloud Strategy survey says 76% of respondents are multi-cloud, and within 2 years, 86% expect to be. The results skew bigger. 90% of companies larger than 5,000 say they use multiple clouds, but 60% of small businesses, defined as fewer than 100, are also reporting multiple cloud environments, which is expected to rise to 81% in 2 years. Google commissioned a report on modernizing banks, finding that 83% of respondents were using cloud as part of their primary computing infrastructure. Per ZDNet, quote, "The research found that although the vast majority of financial institutions have adopted cloud technologies in some form or other, organizations are still keeping some of their core activities on premises." Insider, meanwhile, is reporting the, quote, "honeymoon is over for cloud computing." While a catchy headline, the main focus, cloud is moving into maturity, and a focus on cloud smart, where companies identify applications and data which are a good fit for the cloud, versus cloud first, where results can be in poorly matched use cases. And while we're talking cloud, Microsoft announced the general availability of Azure Government Top Secret, bringing 60 services to the government in accordance with Intelligence Community Directive 503, which is the set of policies for IT systems used by intelligence agencies. Now, why do we care? Cloud Smart is a phrase to highlight here, and the continued value of an IT services company. It's the advisory services most of all. I continue to use the US government and secrecy as the gold standard for proving the viability of the cloud. If it can handle data top secret, it can handle any data. That's not to say any cloud solution works for any data set, as evidenced by the distinct top secret offering. It's all obvious statements, and still worth repeating. Here's the key. For those calling themselves managed services providers, how much of the offering is focused around cloud rather than device management? So let's look at the current economy. Small business confidence fell in August to its lowest level since March, with 39% of owners expecting U.S. economic conditions to improve over the next year, down from half in July and 2/3 in March, according to a survey of more than 560 small businesses for the Wall Street Journal by Vistage Worldwide Incorporated. The coverage from the journal also cites 9% lower restaurant bookings from 2019 levels last week, after surpassing 2019 levels in June, as well as visits to grocery stores, gas stations, gyms, restaurants, and retail stores starting to drop in late July, after also surpassing 2019 levels earlier in the summer. The share of employed adults who are vacationing typically peaks in July at around 3%, an economist at the job site Indeed noted. And while the 2021 rate is higher than in 2020, it's still well below normal at under 2%. Underusing time off is exacerbating burnout across the U.S. workforce. 52% of workers said they're experiencing burnout in 2021, per a recent Indeed survey, and all that data from Axios. And AT&T has joined the list of companies requiring a COVID-19 vaccine. This from management employees entering a work location. Why do we care? No comfort in getting a prediction right here. The economy is going to be rougher before it's recovered. I'm seeing too many pieces of what I call optimism porn, a report that says how great the market is for IT services. Demand is most certainly going to be high for IT services. That said, the labor market is tight, making hiring harder, and likely constraining growth for end customers. Those employees are more stressed out. Sections of the economy that rely on physical contact are going to be impacted too. Which leads back to why we care. Blindly assuming everything is going to be great is a poorly selected plan. Instead, plan for continued bumps and be pleasantly surprised if they aren't hit, because more than likely, those bumps will be hit. A report from Philips highlights spending in mid-sized and large hospitals on cybersecurity. A key number: more than 13% of hospitals had no inventory and no way of knowing how many medical devices were deployed. Almost half of all respondents find the staffing they have for medical device and IoT security inadequate. 48% of hospital executives had reported a forced or proactive shutdown in the past 6 months as a result of external attacks or queries. Sentinel Lab is reporting new malware focused on macOS, highlighting 150 new samples of the AdLoad adware, undetected by Apple's own on-device malware scanner. IDC has revealed that more than one-third of all organizations globally have faced a ransomware attack or breach in the past year. Just 13% said they did not pay the ransom. Colonial Pipeline is sending out breach notification letters to 5,810 current and former employees, revealing their information was accessed by the DarkSide ransomware group during the attack in May. And there are still not enough skilled professionals to meet demand, per the 5th Annual Industry Report from the Information Systems Security Association and Analyst Enterprise Strategy Group, ESG. A heavier workload, unfilled positions, and worker burnout are contributing to the skills gap. Nearly all surveyed at 95% believe the gap has not improved in recent years. Now, why do we care? So the landscape. There's a gap in staff, in inventory management, and in a wide open opportunity for criminals to take advantage of, and with just 13% saying they didn't pay, it's easy to see why this is a fast-growing threat, because an overwhelming majority of victims do pay. Take those points and skills and consider them in your own business. Employee retention is a significant metric right now, with labor hard to find and valuable. Savvy organizations are going to manage that closely. As we think about data, let's look at some large organization survey data from S&P Global Market Intelligence and Immuta. 84% said they thought data privacy and security requirements would limit access to data at their organizations over the next 24 months. At least 90% of those who answered the survey said data quality and trust were becoming more important than the volume or quantity of data. 60% of respondents said their organizations have a chief data officer, while 40% do not. More than 71% said the number of data consumers in their organization has steadily increased over time. Another 73% added that more human and machine data consumers will need to access data over the next 2 years. According to the survey, the changes to data consumption and deployment are also being affected by legislation, which found that 84% said their enterprise was subject to regulations like GDPR and HIPAA. Now, why do we care? I talk a lot about data management as a service, and it's this insight on enterprise and large organizations that takes me there. These problems will exist at all sizes of organizations and will be addressed differently. A smaller company will outsource for help here, and this is the very definition of a business value style service. Getting into data management screams opportunity. So how are top organizations standing out digitally? CIO Dive with this: technology, labor, outsourcing, and overhead costs across general and administrative functions dropped 29% among the digital world class organizations with top digital performance, according to research from the Hackett Group released in June. World-class digital companies operate with 26% fewer overall full-time equivalents, decrease labor costs per end-user equivalent by 33%, and realize 41% lower outsourcing costs, despite spending 3% more on technology than non-world-class peers. By investing 36% more money on software as a service, the digital world class improves agility, responsiveness, and resilience. Those advanced companies also spend 63% more on emerging technologies such as machine learning, natural language processing, and blockchain than their counterparts. Now, why do we care? This is the data to justify IT services. Advanced companies are investing in technology, and here's the direct measurements to show the results. Oh, and don't miss out on that software as a service detail. I'm working on my thinking about the SMB business of the future, and that tidbit colors a lot of my thinking. Thinking about how your customers should operate, even more than your own business operations, will result in much more aligned services. The shift in the so-called return to work has made a number of headlines this week. Live Nation will require performers and attendees to be vaccinated in states where that's allowed, starting for October 4th. There's data from the Lollapalooza Music Festival too. After requiring vaccination or a negative COVID test, Chicago health officials have said the event was not a superspreader, and just 0.05% of concert goers contracted the virus. The Consumer Electronics Show has announced it will require vaccinations as well for the event, or proof of a positive antibody test. The event will include a digital component as well. Gartner Events has indicated their October event will be all virtual, canceling the in-person event planned. Amazon Web Services has canceled their Reinforce event, which was scheduled for August 24th to 25th, and replaced it with a free virtual event. Indeed is reporting that job postings requiring vaccination has jumped 90% in the last month. That's not just restaurants and shops, it's software, marketing, and sales too. That said, Protocol profiles 3 companies who have not moved with a mandate, one achieving nearly 90% vaccination rate within the office staff in collecting proof of vaccination. In Tech Services Ideas, OpenTable is adding a verified for entry option. This allows restaurants to share verification information on a diner across the network and reduce the number of checks on an individual. Now, why do we care? There's certainly a story here about businesses acting more like governments that's becoming a theme during the pandemic. As a reminder, in the US, it is legal to require vaccination for employment. There are 2 angles here. First, every business is going to need to make their decision on how to balance the risks. Both local conditions and attitudes will vary, just as individual business cultures do. There isn't a single answer here. Second, there is opportunity for providers in this space. Besides your own business, there are data management opportunities for how this reporting is done and how the data is collected. OpenTable's solution is specific to that industry, and there are a number of solutions appearing in the market. The services opportunity is advising customers and managing the data. And we'll see in the next story the complexity. IT providers are going to recognize that the pandemic isn't over and plan accordingly.
Think you know PC Matic? Think again. PC Matic is working with MSPs to deliver true zero-trust, default-deny endpoint security, allowing only trusted applications and blocking all the rest. A lightweight, simple-to-deploy, and easy-to-manage approach to application allow listing. Layering a default-deny approach provides MSPs of all sizes the ability to focus again on prevention, and PC Matic delivers this without impacting performance or efficiency. Find out more by visiting pcmatic.com/MSP and ask about their exclusive lead sharing program backed by a primetime national TV campaign.
This isn't an international general politics and news show, so I hadn't covered Afghanistan. That said, The Intercept is reporting on the loss of U.S. military biometrics devices. Quoting the piece, the devices, known as HIIDE for Handheld Interagency Identity Detection Equipment, were seized last week during the Taliban's offensive, according to a Joint Special Operations Command official and 3 former U.S. military personnel, all of whom worried that sensitive data they contain could be used by the Taliban. HIIDE devices contain identifying biometric data such as iris scans and fingerprints, as well as biographical information, and are used to access large centralized databases. It's unclear how much of the U.S. military's biometric database on the Afghan population has been compromised. Why do we care? This is an example of not thinking about what happens with data when something goes wrong. This is clearly a security measure used to track identity. One can understand how the decisions were made to use the technology to check identity. And what wasn't considered was what would happen if things went wrong. Tying this into the previous story as the example, the opportunity here for providers is to ensure that the downsides are considered. That's data management. Yesterday was return to work, so today must be a slew of market outlook data. 9 in 10 executives believe the channel maintains its relevance in the IT universe, according to CompTIA's International State of the Channel 2021 report. But they are split when asked about the health of the channel. 46% say it's holding steady in its current form, and 44% say it's rapidly changing. Respondents predict positive revenue potential over the next 2 years from a variety of services offerings, with cybersecurity topping the list, cited by 69% of respondents. Other services expected to generate solid customer business include cloud services, 68%, data analytics, 68%, digital marketing services, 66%, and emerging technologies, 66%. When looking by region, channel partners have uniquely different views on the services that offer the greatest growth potential: emerging tech in Australia and New Zealand, cybersecurity in the Benelux, data in Canada, digital marketing services in the UK, and cloud services in the US. The channel company, too, released survey data. 80% of channel partners expect sales growth in 2021. Cloud, remote management, and collaboration and security were the top technologies in that survey, and the survey also noted the continued labor shortage. Over half of providers added services in response to the pandemic. The survey's headline reported 28% citing a stronger business, and this commentator will note the 37% who reported a weaker or much weaker business over the same reporting time period, comparing now to a year ago. Snow Software did a survey of IT leaders. 92% of IT leaders report their organizations were moving or had already moved to a hybrid work model. Top priorities now include enabling competitive differentiation, 57%, reducing or optimizing IT costs, 55%, managing digital transformation initiatives, 54%, and accelerating cloud adoption and migration, 48%. Why do we care? Look, I think CompTIA's cautious optimism is more realistic than the channel company's botched headline. When 37% of companies are in a worse place than they were the year before, citing stronger than ever is missing the data interpretation mark. It's interesting to me that CompTIA and Snow Software both focus on opportunities in business management, things like differentiation, IT costs, analytics, or digital transformation, and Channel Company focuses on cloud, remote management, and security. This is why an analyst matters. Who is interpreting the data matters too, not just what the survey says. Looking at patterns of data across multiple sources, actual opportunity seems to be thematically in things that drive business outcomes. I've highlighted job vacancy data in the US repeatedly, showing the struggles to hire workers. The UK is facing a similar problem, as shown in new data released this week, with more job openings than ever before last month. The number of people who are unemployed or out of the workforce is also higher than before the pandemic. In that context, Gartner published a report about the gaps in future employee experience. 66% of employees felt they had required technology to effectively work remotely, compared to the vast majority of executives reporting 80% had the technology to effectively work remotely. 76% of executives felt as though the company had invested in providing them with resources that allow them to work the way they would on-site in a virtual environment, yet only 59% of employees agreed with this. 50% agreed that company leadership has expressed a preference for work conditions to return to their pre-pandemic model, compared to 71% of respondent executives. For context, Microsoft's 2021 Work Trend Index found that 41% of employees across the globe are considering leaving their current employer this year, and 46% say they're likely to move because they can now work remotely. And let's layer in mental health. 44% of workers say they feel fatigued on the job, up from 34% in 2020, per a study conducted by the human resources consulting firm Robert Half. 52% of U.S. employers say they are experiencing significant workplace issues with substance misuse or addiction by employees, according to a new survey from the Hartford. That's up from 36% in March 2020. 31% of U.S. employers say workforce mental health is having a severe or significant financial impact on the company, up from just 20% in March 2020. Now, why do we care? There's some notable divide in execs versus workers on all things work from home. My working premise continues to be the disconnect between workers and company leadership, and that continues to show out in the data. I believe one can't talk about the hiring problems without understanding the cultural shifts going on among people, i.e. workers. It's clear leadership doesn't understand what's going on there, that there are health strains, both pandemic and mental, that are changing workers' attitude to work, and that the labor shortage, workers have a lot more power. The data just says that. Leaders who blindly ignore that will run into problems. Savvy operators and managers will manage this new landscape and even assist customers in their navigation, because technology is a component of the solution. Nearly 3/4 of IT professionals, 72%, are worried that tools and techniques nation-state hackers use could filter through to the darknet and be used to attack their businesses. The worldwide survey of IT decision makers, carried out by HP Wolf Security, found that over half, 58% of IT professionals believe their businesses could become a target of a nation-state attack. A further 70% believe they could end up being collateral damage in a cyber war. When discussing specific anxieties relating to a nation-state cyber attack, sabotage of IT systems or data was the main concern shared by 49% of respondents. That from IT Pro. A report released Tuesday by KPMG looks at the growing concerns among consumers about data collection and offers advice for businesses on how to address those concerns. 70% of the companies analyzed expanded their collection of personal consumer data. 75% of the business leaders polled said they're comfortable with the level of data their company collects, and 95% claimed their company has strong or very strong data protection measures in place. 62% felt that their companies should do more to protect consumer data. A third of them said that consumers should be more concerned about how their data is used by their company, while 29% admitted that their company has sometimes used unethical means to collect private data. On the consumer front, people are becoming even more skeptical and wary about their data being collected. A full 86% of the respondents said they feel a growing concern about data privacy, while 78% expressed fears about the amount of data being collected. Some 40% of the consumers surveyed don't trust companies to use their data ethically, and 13% don't even trust their own employers. Pew Research with Americans' opinion on false information. 48% of U.S. adults now say the government should take steps to restrict it, up from 39% in 2018. At the same time, adults who say freedom of information should be protected, even if it means some misinformation, has decreased from 58% to 50%. Let's hit on the intersection of regulations. A UK citizen tried to file a US class action lawsuit, made up entirely of UK residents, against Matic, which is a California-based third-party advertising company. The move was blocked by a judge in Northern California after Matic said it would submit to jurisdiction in the courts of England and Wales. This in the context of the need for a replacement for the EU-US Privacy Shield, which was the framework for data transfers across the Atlantic and was invalidated by the courts. IDC's new report says spending on data and business analytics will increase 10.1% this year over last. Now, why do we care? There's this market in data management out there. Consumers are growing more and more distrustful, meaning savvy businesses are thinking about how to navigate that and differentiate, and thus providers can work in this space. There's a whole legal compliance layer to data too, making this more and more complicated and more profitable. Research from Proofpoint and the Ponemon Institute found that ransom payments typically account for less than 20% of the total cost of a ransomware attack. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has released new guidance to help government and private sector organizations prevent data breaches resulting from ransomware double extortion schemes. CISA's fact sheet includes best practices for preventing ransomware attacks and protecting sensitive information from exfiltration attempts. A quick summary: there's nothing controversial there. And here's a new ransomware tactic. Abnormal Security reported this week of a ransomware operator asking a victim's company's staff to deploy ransomware and then take a cut of the proceeds. Social engineering within the organization to get an insider deployment. Why do we care? New insider threat: employees being paid off to deploy ransomware. So much for the perimeter trust model, and even trusting your own staff. If you're not already seeing the case for zero trust architectures, here's the final reasoning. The payment data from Ponemon interestingly highlights how the damage of an attack is not just the payment. The ability to absorb an attack is measured in how large a check a business can write when it happens. That appears to be really the metric. Big companies can write big ones, and it's a smaller relative cost. Small companies cannot, and conditions on the ground continue to worsen. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech. And I'll talk to you again next week.